All right, today we're putting on our digital detective hats. We're about to do a deep dive into a really sophisticated hardware attack, one that's going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about device security. So, let me just start with this question. What if a factory reset was no longer enough? I mean, we're all taught that, right? It's the big red button, the ultimate fix that wipes away all our problems. But what if it wasn't? What if a threat was buried so deep it just laughed at a reset?
That's exactly what we're looking at today. We are going inside a hijack that doesn't just live in your software or your operating system. No, this thing is burned right into the firmware. It's a ghost in the machine that survives every single attempt to kick it out.
So our story really kicks off with this unfixable glitch. A user is basically trapped by their own device, a device that feels like it doesn't belong to them anymore, and the one tool they trust to fix it, it just fails.
Now, for Chrome OS devices, that tool is called a power wash. It's supposed to be a total wipeout, it should return the device to that pristine out-of-the-box state. But when it was used on this compromised machine, the problem was still there. And that wasn't just a glitch. It was a complete breakdown of a core security feature. And it was our first huge clue that we were not dealing with some simple virus. Nope, this thing was way, way deeper.
Okay, so the standard fixes are out the window. Our investigators had to go deeper, digging into the network logs. They were looking for what you could call the digital handshake, that exact moment a device boots up and decides who its real boss is.
And they found it. Buried deep in the startup commands was the attacker's fingerprint. See, this wasn't some random bug. It was a set of very specific, malicious instructions telling the device exactly what to do from the second it got power.
So, what you're looking at here is basically the DNA of the hijack. Let's break this down. Those enterprise enrollment parameters, both hard-coded to 15, that's the key. Think of it like a secret password that forces the device to believe it belongs to some big corporation, not to you. Then you've got the managed user ID, which points to a rogue account, creating this kind of ghost organization. And that last line, policy fetch status success, well, that's the heartbeat, confirming the device is successfully checking in with the attacker's server.
And this slide just lays it all out, plain and simple. On a normal device, enrollment is your choice. It's your machine. But on the compromised device, that choice is gone. That Modulus 15 lock makes enrollment mandatory. It forces the hardware to obey this rogue organization before you even get a chance to log in.
But, a firmware lock is only one part of the puzzle. To actually control the device, to siphon off data, the attacker needed an accomplice, a piece of software hiding in plain sight.
This quote from the source material really hits the nail on the head. Attackers love to create these malicious browser extensions that look totally legitimate, like useful tools. They use trusted names and logos as a clever disguise for their operations, basically building a shadow infrastructure right under your nose.
And here it is, our accomplice. It's an extension with a specific ID, disguised as the Google Docs offline clone. I mean, who would think twice about that? But its real job? Siphoning your data. The forensic smoking gun here is that network anonymization key and its cross-site capability. In plain English, that means this thing could create its own secret network traffic, completely bypassing the browser's normal security to phone home to the attacker.
So where was it hiding? Take a look. On the left, you see the file tree of the extension. It looks perfectly normal, right? But buried inside, which you can see on the right, is custom code using something called the Developer Private API. You can think of this as a kind of master key, a backdoor for developers, giving this extension deep, deep control of the browser, way more than any normal extension should ever have.
So you have the firmware lock, and you have the shadow extension, but how do you keep the user from ever figuring this out? Well, the attacker's final move was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. They built an invisibility cloak.
The goal here is pretty simple and pretty smart. If you, the user, can't see the "this device is managed by" message, you will never know there's a problem to begin with. The attacker programmatically hid any and all user interface elements that would give the game away. And this is how they did it. This one single line of CSS code is the entire invisibility cloak. The key is that display none !important command. It's a simple instruction that tells the browser to never show the management warnings, no matter what. And that !important flag, that acts like a trump card, overriding everything else. It's an incredibly simple but brutally effective way to hide the truth in plain sight.
Okay, now for the good part. With the full scope of the hijack finally understood, our investigators came up with a surgical plan to take back control. And this isn't about brute force, it's all about precision.
They called it the sovereign purge. Step 1 is simple. Identify the bad guy, the malicious extension. Step 2, and this is the really clever trick, you force a state change. Think of it like distracting a guard. You flip its file access flag to true, which basically wakes up the extension and momentarily confuses that firmware lock. Then, step 3, while it's in that confused state, you hit it with the deletion command.
Because if you just try to delete the extension directly, you get this: policy lock detected. The firmware lock actually fights back to protect its accomplice. That error message is proof that the hijack is resisting, and it's exactly why that second wake-up step in the sovereign purge is so absolutely critical.
But even with the malicious extension gone, the firmware lock is still there. The device is still trying to phone home to its master. So to truly set it free, you have to sever that connection entirely. And that required a second line of attack, this time at the network level, the Starlink shield.
The protocol is really simple but incredibly powerful. You just go into your router's settings and you block the specific domain and IP address the hijack is using to communicate. And the result? The next time the device tries to phone home, its policy fetch is going to fail. Without that success heartbeat we saw earlier, the ghost enrollment eventually just times out and releases its grip on the hardware for good.
Which brings us back to a really fundamental question. This whole thing proves that a device can be compromised at a level most of us never even consider. So, if your hardware can be owned before you even log on, what does ownership truly mean anymore? It's a question we're all going to have to grapple with as these kinds of threats become more common. Definitely something to think about.